How's it going, friends? And welcome to an absolute masterclass for first-time home buyers, or even just people who haven't bought a home for a long time, or out-of-state home buyers, people who are really just, you want to know start to finish everything there is to know about the home buying process here in Denver, specifically in general in Colorado. So let's get into it. How's it going, my friends? My name is Jesse Lynch, and I work with the hardest working real estate team in the game. We're called Welcome to Denver, and you can check out our website, welcometodenver.co, as in Colorado. But this YouTube channel is all about helping you find a place to call home, a place to land here in beautiful Denver, Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, Fort Collins, blah, 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 all of Colorado. And that's whether you're buying a house for the first time, like this video is kind of, catered towards, or relocating here from a different city, state, country, planet. This video, I would say, still helpful for a lot of y'all. So relocations, first-time home buyers, that's what we do, and that's what we do better than anybody else. So if either of those two things or both of those things appeal to you, then do us both a favor, subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get notified so you can see every time we put out these videos, whether it be a first-time home buyer video like this or that in-depth virtual tour that a lot of y'all know about, I think you'll be glad you did, and I would super appreciate it as well. And while I have you here, if you wouldn't mind giving the video a thumbs up and saying what's up in the comments, you can say, buckle up, here we go, masterclass, done. Something like that, whatever you want to do. And as always, if you are thinking about moving here, or if you already live here and you're trying to buy a house here, get a hold of us. We will crush it for you. Nobody will work harder for you. This is what we do. You can go to our website, welcometodenver.co, where we have a contact form that you can fill out literally in moments, or you can shoot us an email directly to info@welcometodenver.co. They lead to the same inbox, so completely up to you how you do it. We have a phone number available, but I'll be honest, a lot of crazies calling on the phone. So I would very much prefer the other two options. That seems to be the slickest route. And yeah, so we look forward to hearing from you, and we will absolutely crush it. This video is going to be long, right? It's definitely going to be long. You probably already see at the bottom how long this video is. I'm going to do my best to be succinct, but it is a long process. If we were just sitting down like over coffee, which, I have tea, so grab a coffee, sit down, pretend we're here hanging out and kind of talking through all this stuff, it would probably take an hour at least if it was a dialogue. So thanks for hanging out. And let's dive in. Number one thing, sort of the very beginning that's going to happen is you're going to reach out to us, right? And obviously if you reach out to somebody else, cool, the process may work similarly. Certain things that I'm telling you are going to be, standards across the board anyway, but I don't know why you wouldn't reach out to us, because here we are, right? We're learning, you're learning, we're having fun. Okay, so these first three steps will sometimes happen in slightly different orders, but I think the most effective route that we found is this one, right? Which is, first you contact us, we put you in touch with a lender of whom we have a wonderful relationship with, and they absolutely crush it and just are such good communicators and all that. We've heard nothing but good things about folks who have worked with them, and that's why we continue to work with them, because they really are good at what they do. So there's reach out to us, talk to a lender / get pre-approved, and then sort of the MLS home search, basically getting you set up to find the home online before you go look at it. So let's just assume that it's going in kind of the typical, the most common one we see, which is you reach out to us, you talk to a lender, and then once you have that search, that dollar amount figured out, then we do the MLS search. That just seems to be the most effective. So you reach out to us, and if you're wondering when to reach out to us, like how far out should it be? Super good question, but we have a video that you can watch after this one that is basically, what is the home buying timeline? How long does it take to buy a home here in Denver? And that should hopefully help answer that question, but that itself is a pretty long video, so it doesn't really fit into here. But I would say typically depending on how sort of, quick you're moving on everything, I would say somewhere between 2 months and 6 months before you absolutely, have to get here. 2 months would be tight, but if you do reach out, then we'll get after it. But, 2 to 6 months, somewhere in that range, kind of from start to finish is pretty common, right? So you get a hold of us, whether it's through the website or directly emailing us, and we're going to say, more than likely, let's figure out a time to chat, whether that be in person, on Zoom, or just a phone call. They all work, and it kind of depends on how you want to do it. We're happy to, suit and accommodate you, but that's typically how we're going to start a conversation. And I would expect that conversation to go somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour. Sometimes it goes longer, depending on, like, let's say you had a pre-approval and you knew your budget. Okay, then we might kind of have an introductory conversation, and we might also talk through, specifically what kind of house you're looking for, etc. It might even make plans to go view a house. So somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour and a half, I would say that first sort of contact should be. And then typically after that first contact, we get everything sort of lined up to where you are going to be headed in the right direction. And for the most part, that involves getting you in touch with the lender that we work with. That's really slick. We like to do an email where we just connect you. And then that way that lender knows that you're coming from us, and we send them quite a bit of business. So we'd like to think that they are going to take tremendous care of you for that. But I would also like to think that they take really good care of everybody. But nonetheless, they know that you're coming from us. And so maybe they give you the red carpet treatment, And one thing that a lot of people ask is, how long does a pre-approval last? So once you talk to the lender, how long is that pre-approval good for before they have to pull your credit again, right? Very good question. That said, this is not lending advice. By the way, none of this is lending advice. None of this is financial advice. Depending on the lender, that pre-approval is going to last somewhere between 90 days and 120 days. I think I've heard of some lasting like 6 months, but that may have stopped once COVID came around, as things just became a little more volatile. I wouldn't be shocked if that comes back, but yeah. Somewhere between 3 months and 4 months is typically what I would expect if I were you. And the one thing to note that the lender always says is that if they have to pull your credit again in that 3 months or 4 months, your credit will have been repaired, from the little bit of a dent that a mortgage, inquiry gives you. It will have been repaired, once it comes back around to where you have to pull it again. So unless you have a very, very low credit score and you're like right on the edge, then maybe be particularly careful. But if you're sitting sweet, I wouldn't be that worried about it in general. I actually just applied for a mortgage myself, and personally, not really worried about a few point ding that's going to be repaired in a few months in the interest of buying an asset. You know what I mean? So when we connect you with them, they will likely ask you or prepare you for the idea of, like, here's the documents that you're going to want to have for us to run the pre-approval. They can do sort of a verbal pre-approval, but that's more of like what I would call a pre-qualification, and it's not going to be that strong, right? Maybe they might feel confident enough for you to make offers, but in the event that you misrepresented yourself in any way, and not necessarily on purpose, right? I'm not saying you're trying to be untruthful, but in the event that maybe you forgot part of something on your credit report or something, a debt that you have, right? They're going to have to run that more thoroughly. They're going to have to actually run your credit and look at all your stuff to have a better idea of that pre-approval number. But a lot of the time they can kind of give that, really quickly. And that process can take an hour, or it can take a week, depending on how long it takes you to get your documents to them and all that. They're going to ask you for, I think, 5 documents, and I'm actually just going to read these. Your last 2 years of completed tax returns, right? So whether that's your 1040 tax returns, self-employed, it would be all schedules. So like Schedule K1. If you're self-employed, they're going to say all of the schedules and businesses, right? So if you have like 3 LLCs or whatever that you're filing under, then they want all of those schedules. That's always fun. As somebody who is technically self-employed, also, an absolute party. But nonetheless, it's what it is. They're also going to want your 3 most recent pay stubs. Again, if you're self-employed or commission-based, just probably the last 3 times you got paid. It's not going to be a normal pay stub like a W-2 employee would get, but that's what they're going to want. And then your most recent 2 full months of banking and asset statements. So if you have, like, I have 2 bank accounts. I have a business bank account. I have my own personal bank account. They're going to want basically statements, and not just a screen grab. It has to be a legitimate statement. Even if there's a blank page, as long as it's numbered at the end, page 7 of 7 or something, and it's blank, they still need that. So all pages of your statement for all of the accounts that actually apply to you. And then lastly, your driver's license or a state ID of some sort if you don't have a driver's license. And boom, done. You are pre-approved. Obviously, slightly more complicated than that. Lender wizardry. But yeah, it is pretty quick. And once you get those documents in, they're pretty good at running it. If you're self-employed, it could take a little bit longer. They have to kind of run a few things and make sure that everything, is up to snuff, because we don't want another 2007, 2008 market crash where, stuff hit a fan, if you catch my drift. So yeah, the lending practices are much more strict than they were back then. And ultimately, it's a good thing. Is it kind of annoying when you're getting a loan? Sure. But I would say very well worth it. So once you're pre-approved, then we're probably going to hop on another phone call and go through the criteria of, what you want in a house. And the big things that we're looking for example, how we typically like to present it is the minimum number of bedrooms, like the minimum number of blank, really, that you would consider. So minimum number of bedrooms that you consider. A very common response is, we would consider a house with 3, but we would love 4. Okay, super, super common. So then we would just set it at 3+, up to you to decide if that 3-bedroom layout works for you, or, a lot of times it's, we need 3 bedrooms, but we also need an office. So if there's 3 bedrooms and a den or a nook or a basement or something like that, where we can put an office, that works for us, just so long there's a space for that office. And then minimum bathrooms. Will you consider a 1-bathroom home? Or do you absolutely need 2? Do you need 1.5, right? So would a bathroom and a powder room on the main floor, would that work for you? Stuff like that. Do you require a garage? Yes or no? Is there a minimum square footage that you would consider? A lot, if it's a 3-bedroom, people might say, well, I wouldn't really be interested in a 3-bedroom under 1,000 square feet because that would be extremely cramped. Something like that, right? Also, the age of the home. Is there a maximum age of the home that you're interested in? Or is some people, they want a certain era of home. Maybe they really like mid-century sort of ranch style homes, at which point I would say, okay, we're probably going 1940 to 1963 or something like that, maybe 65 to catch it. But for the most part, we leave that blank. And for the most part, if anything, it would be, I don't want anything older than 1978 or something, which is when a lot of the building practices changed. Lead paint and asbestos were no longer allowed in homes. So if that is a concern, then I would probably be aware of that. And, if you absolutely do not want to mess with that, then let's set the minimum age as 1978, maximum age. And then, of course, potentially most importantly is, what locations do you want the home in? We can sort of draw a map. We can go by zip code, that kind of thing. But yeah, and if you don't know where, then I may recommend that you binge this channel, because we have covered a lot of the metro area, and we will continue to do so. So depending on when you're watching this video, I bet we have even more virtual tours out. Unless you're watching this when it just got released, then back catalog, we have a ton of stuff and a lot of very good spots for a lot of people to consider. Okay, and then you have your criteria, you know what you're looking for, you're starting to see houses, and if you're all pre-approved, etc., it's pretty simple to take the next step, which is to go see a house, to start doing showings, right? And basically that's as simple as shoot a text over to us, to whomever is helping you, and say, hi, I like this house. I'd like to see it. You can send an address. You can send a link. You can send an MLS number. And they basically all work. We can look it up and sort of determine what the house is, set up a showing for you. And then it's as simple as like, hey, if you're trying to grab coffee or something, when works for you? Cool. Let's do this time. We'll meet at the house and you'll do your first showing and probably the first of many showings until you find homes that you're interested in, which we'll get to in a second. You might be watching this from out of state as one of the potential relocation folks that we help. You might be thinking, well, what if I'm out of state? How does that work? Do not be distressed. That's from Everything is Illuminated. I mean, I did a bad impression of it, but if anybody out there has seen that film, how great of a film, right? If you like movies and have not seen it, Everything is Illuminated. So good. I would highly recommend it. So if you're out of state, it's all good. This is what we do, and this is what we do better than anybody else. Basically, how this would work is we would go do a virtual showing of the home for you. There's a couple ways that we can do it. For one, we can coordinate with you to where you can, be on the other end. You can do a FaceTime or Zoom or something like that. And you can be on the other end and it can be more interactive. Or if maybe you're working or, just not available, then we can go do a video where we record it. Typically, the move there is we take a Zoom video and we record it to the cloud. And that way we can send you a link directly, and the moment we see it, you can see it, or I guess right after we see it, you can see it as well, rather than us having to go home or whatever and upload a massive 30-minute or hour-long video. And then from there, you get it under contract and you have time to look it over. We have another video that if this part sounds confusing, we have another video called What to Expect When Moving to Denver, which is basically like, how does it work, right? Like, how does the relocation process work? So check that one out. That's a ways back on our channel, but it's relatively simple. So I would say check that out. And that should do a pretty good job of diving deeper into that part of it. So now you're looking at houses, right? Whether it be virtually or in person or some hybrid of the two. And how many houses do people look at? It could be between 1 and maybe 100. Most people aren't looking at 100. In fairness, most people are not looking at 100 houses. I would say average is going to be somewhere around 20 to 30. But that average is kind of brought down by some people who really luck out and they, get maybe the house that they look at in like 5 showings or literally the first showing. We've had people get offers accepted. Is it likely? No. But does it happen? Yeah, it's kind of crazy when it does. But in general, I would say average is probably 20, but I would expect more than that. I would sort of emotionally plan for, 40 showings, 50, maybe something like that. And just plan. You're just looking. Get some thick skin. We're looking until we get something accepted, and you will get something accepted. And yeah, life will be cool. You'll be in a place that you want to be because of that sort of that diligence. And then next sort of step in the process, you look at a bunch of houses, you find one you like, and you say, boy, I really like this. What's the next step? That would be writing an offer of some sort, right? And how does the offer writing work? Pretty simple. You basically, we're probably going to have a chat, whether that's in person out in front of the house where none of your competition can hear, or maybe we go to a coffee shop, or maybe it's on the phone once we get back to collective homes or whatever, neutral ground. And very often you go see a house and the listing agent has announced a deadline for offers, which is both annoying because then likely there's multiple offers, but that just is what it is. Or it's nice because okay, cool. We have that amount of time to write up this offer, to think about the terms that we want to submit. And I'm actually not going to dive into everything that we do for how to get offers accepted, because the reality is we do a lot. We help a lot of buyers, and we want the people that we help to have the upper hand. We want the people that we help to have all the knowledge that we have amassed over doing so many showings and writing so many offers for people. So I will dive into what the aspects of it are, but I'm not going to say the things that we do to get offers accepted, if that makes sense. But so the big pieces of the offer that you're going to have to, wrap your head around and that we will explain, and I'll be happy to explain here as well. The first one is probably the obvious one. It's the one that everybody thinks of and thinks is the most important part. But while it is potentially the most important part, it is far from the only important part, which is purchase price, right? You have heard that we're in a seller's market, that the market is hot, that things are going for over list price. A lot of that is true, but it's also kind of a vagary that, the media uses. And those statistics are not nearly as helpful as I would say the actual reality of how it behaves from having done it, right? From us having written offers and lost, and written offers and lost, and then written offers and getting them accepted, and seeing stuff all over the market. And okay, well, how does the statistic is one thing, but what is the actual practice? So purchase price, and more often than not, the list price has very little to do with what the actual purchase price will be. I mean, it's usually kind of close, but we're seeing between, I would say, 5% over list price and 15% over list price as what offers are getting accepted. That's a pretty big range. I realize that. 5% of 500,000 is 25,000. 15% is 75,000. So somewhere between 525 and 575, that's probably where it'll fall. And I'm not going to dive in too deep for how we figure stuff like that out because, again, we want our people to have the upper hand. Okay, so purchase price. The next piece is going to be earnest money. Earnest, not as in Ernest goes to jail, Ernest goes to camp, what Ernest scares stupid, something like that. Ernest Saves Christmas. Tremendous films, but that's not what we're talking about. Earnest money as in it's basically a down payment. It's basically a deposit on your down payment, actually. So basically what you're doing is once an offer gets accepted, you would present or provide the seller with a chunk of money that says, hey, I mean business. You can hold on to this money. And in the event that I bail, in the event that I back out for anything not laid out within the purchase agreement, then you get to keep that money. And now that might sound scary, but there are plenty of sort of outs within a purchase agreement that as a buyer, you're somewhat protected from losing your earnest money unless you're doing stuff that is silly, right? Unless you're behaving in a way that we wouldn't recommend, and just bailing just to bail, that could get a little dicey, but nobody has done that yet, knock on wood. It's once you are under contract on a house, for the most part, you really do intend to move forward with it. And if something catastrophic or unfortunate were to happen to you and your financing couldn't happen or whatever, then it's all good. You likely are okay to back out of that and get your earnest money back, and you're not really out any money except potentially stuff like inspection costs and I suppose gas or whatever for looking at houses. But again, earnest money, we are seeing somewhere between 1 and 2% of the total purchase price as being that earnest money amount. So if it's a $500,000 house, somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 would be what we would expect, what we're seeing offers getting accepted at. And now, none of these things are things that we can tell you what to offer. We can say what we've seen get accepted and such, but we can't say this is what you should offer, right? It's your choice. We can't give financial advice. We can give real estate advice, but right, it's your decision to make. So yeah, 1 to 2% of the purchase price for earnest money. So likewise, if it's $1 million home, that's $10,000 to $20,000, somewhere in that ballpark. And like I said, that earnest money is a deposit on your down payment. So it's not this extra money that you're coming up with outside of the 3%, 10%, 20% down payment. It's here's this chunk of money, and then here's your down payment, and that money just becomes part of that, right? So it's not extra money, but it is early money, right? It's the first money that you part ways with in getting an offer accepted. Then you're also going to set a closing date, and for the most part, we're like, hey, whatever the seller wants right now is what you're going to do, which typically is somewhere between 3 weeks and 4 weeks from offer accepted to closing. And that's just what we're seeing in the market. If you're watching this in a year, that could very well change. But in general, kind of internalize a month-ish, right? A little faster than a month, and that is likely what you're going to be seeing. But there are situations where maybe the seller wants a longer escrow period. They want to sit in there and maybe until they find a home of their choice, something like that. Those situations do exist, but I would say on average, expect a month. And then the next sort of part of the offer is what type of financing do you have? Luckily, for the most part, this doesn't change very much for most people. You're kind of working with 3% down conventional, 5% down conventional, 3.5% down FHA, 0% down USDA, 10% down FHA conventional, 20% down conventional, etc. Maybe 25% down conventional, which I will say that's a bunch of jargon. None of that really matters, but just know that by the time you're making offers, we'll have spoken with the lender and we'll know kind of what you're working with for that. So that's just something that we lay out in the purchase agreement and it's all good. And then we're also laying out things based on the inspection, right? And there are different deadlines when it comes to the inspection that we will determine ahead of time. There are things called objections. There are things called termination deadlines. Fundamentally, an inspection objection is once you get an inspection performed, are you going to ask the seller to make any repairs or fix anything in general that was discovered during the inspection? And now in this market, folks are waiving that objection. Folks are waiving that right to ask for anything, right? Anything to be done based on the findings of the inspection. Folks are also, then there's also the termination deadline, and which is basically when will the contract be terminated if you were to find something during inspection, right? So you could say, I will waive an objection. I will waive the right to ask for anything based on what is found during the inspection. But you could say, I want a 5-day, 7-day, 10-day, depends on the market, termination deadline, right? Which is to say, I'm going to get the inspection, and if I don't like what I find in the inspection and I just want to back out, then I have this deadline to terminate based on what's found during the inspection. And now some folks, some of your competition potentially, some of the people that we're helping, depending on the situation, depending on how their risk tolerance is or their understanding of it, some folks are waiving both, right? So you can waive the objection, which is I won't ask for anything, and you can waive the deadline, which fundamentally means that there's no longer contingency, there's no longer an inspection option at all, right? You can still get an inspection legally in the state of Colorado. You are allowed to get an inspection no matter what. But in theory, according to the purchase agreement, you can't back out based on, no matter what, you cannot back out or ask for anything based on the findings of the inspection, according to the purchase agreement. That said, there are termination deadlines for other things in financing that in theory you could get an inspection, and if something were to happen, you could bail. You get what I'm saying? And in Colorado and Denver in general, we're seeing inspections cost somewhere between $400 and maybe $600, $700, depending on kind of all of the a la carte items that one is doing. And for the most part, we're doing a general inspection of the home. And then depending on the age of the home, you might add a sewer line inspection, a sewer scope where it's, you're putting a camera. They're beautiful to look at. That's a joke. You're putting a camera down into the sewer line and running it to the street to where the sewer meets, and you're seeing the condition of that, because that can be a fairly costly repair if you have to do it. So generally not a bad idea while getting the rest of the inspection performed. And then let's hop into a couple FAQs about the offer writing process. And some of these are questions, but people don't even know to ask them. But they're sort of additional little pieces of making an offer that can be helpful. And if we say, hey, how about this? Then there's a question of like, well, what is that, right? So I guess it is a frequently asked question. So the first of which would be called an escalation clause. And an escalation clause is, if you are familiar with eBay, it's like max bid on eBay, which is to say, basically, if the current price or the list price of a home, but the current price of an item on eBay is sitting at a certain amount, and you know that that's way undervalued. You might say, well, I'm willing to pay up to this much, but no more than this. And I would like to not have to pay that much if somebody else is only willing to pay somewhere in here, right? So an escalation clause fundamentally is saying we'll beat any proven net offer by X $1,000, somewhere typically $5,000, $10,000, something like that, up to a total purchase price of Y, Z dollars, right? So there's pros and cons to that. And for one, a lot of listing agents, a lot of sellers are not fans of that for whatever reason. Personally, it is my belief, any listing agent or seller out there, it is my belief that an escalation clause emboldens buyers to offer more and ultimately gets a seller more money for their house. So I don't see too many actual cons to that, except that maybe it's a little bit more work, a little bit more fussing and figuring out what the prices are. But if it means more money in your pocket, I say, why not? But that said, if we're helping somebody who is making an offer, almost always we're going to make sure that an escalation clause is something that the sellers and the listing agent are going to entertain. Because sometimes they don't, and then including it is just, you might as well not make the offer because they don't want to see them at all, which is, while I will say annoying, I think it's a bunch of dinosaurs who are making those decisions. I think in general, it's like, well, if you want the house, you kind of got to play by their rules, unfortunately. So the other sort of thing, term or whatever that people don't know what to ask or don't know what it is called an appraisal guarantee. And an appraisal guarantee is basically a way that you as a buyer, you're using financing. So as far as I know, just about every financed offer and financed loan is going to require an appraisal where the lender is going to make somebody, basically they're going to hire a third-party person to go out and appraise the value of the home, give their opinion of the value of the home, and basically try to justify the purchase price that is being offered, right? That's under contract for. And a big part of the reason for that is when things are going for way over list price, let's say it's that $500,000 amount and you're offering 15% over, that's $75,000 higher than list price. And the seller might be like a little concerned that it's not going to appraise at $575,000, at which point the risk of accepting that offer goes up. And an appraisal guarantee, I'm going to leave my hands like this for illustration. An appraisal guarantee says we, the buyers, guarantee to pay in cash up to X dollars, $10,000, $20,000. It could, in theory, it could be $500, but that wouldn't be very helpful. You choose that amount. It depends on how much cash you have to work with, etc. But we, the buyers, guarantee to pay in cash up to X dollars to pay the difference of if it appraises at, let's say, $550, right? That'd be a $25,000 delta between the appraisal price and the agreed upon purchase price. So in that situation, if you had a $25,000 appraisal guarantee, the seller, they still get that $575. You have to come up with an extra $25,000 in cash, which, while frustrating, you got the house, right? And that in this market is kind of the win, right? It's kind of the deal, and cool, you got the house, but yeah, you had to pay an extra $25,000. And just because an appraiser said the value was $550 doesn't truly mean that is the case. That's one person's opinion, but this is just how the situation works. So that's an appraisal guarantee or appraisal gap coverage. There's a bunch of different terms for it, but basically, how much cash can you make up out of pocket to make sure that the seller is getting the price that you offered? Because again, one of the biggest motivations of a seller is this going to close? And am I going to get the money that they said I'm going to get? Which an appraisal guarantee sort of ensures both of those, or certainly bolsters up the likelihood of both of those. So you've written an offer, you've submitted it to the seller, to the listing agent, we've submitted it to the, so we write it up, we send it out for signing to you, and then when we get it back signed, we submit it to the listing agent, they review it, and typically, most of the time, they're going to review all of them, or they should review all of them with the seller. But sometimes the seller will say, just bring me the 5 best, right? Let me look at those. And so they'll review with the seller, and the seller will go over and determine which one that they want to work with. There's a chance they're going to counter and say, hey, I like a lot of this offer. I'm wondering if you can change, these 2 things: closing date, purchase price, appraisal guarantee. And because they're going to try to get the best offer they can. And if you have a great offer, but maybe somebody else has similar offer with a couple things they don't like, they're going to say, any chance you could do better on, this thing and this thing? And if you say, yeah, you know what, that sounds good, then great, you're under contract. Or, if they counter, then you figure that out. And then if you get under contract, or there's a chance, and this happens very often in this market, that they just say, hey, unfortunately, we went with another offer. They might give terms. They might say, here's why, here are the things, the deciding factors, but they likely won't tell you the price that they accepted or the terms that they accepted. They'll just say, in general, here were the things that were most important. Because if they told you the price they accepted and something were to fall through, well, then now you know. Now they've showed their hand, and that's not a very good idea for the seller. And likewise, if we're representing a seller, we are going to be careful about all of that kind of stuff as well. So you submitted the offer, they accepted it, you are officially under contract. Congratulations, that's very exciting. And now from under contract to closing, this period is called escrow. We also have the video about the timeline. We talk about escrow and all the things that happen in escrow, but I'll dive into it maybe slightly shallower here, but nonetheless, from under contract to closing date, that is called escrow. You might hear it sometimes, you might not. And now in this escrow period, you're going to have a few different sort of deadlines and sort of just different periods within it. The first of which is going to be like a due diligence period or an inspection period, right? Where potentially you have waived both. But let's assume you're lucky enough to have both your inspection objection and your termination deadline where you have the right to both of them. Okay, that's probably going to be somewhere in the 5 to 10 day range. 10 would be pretty long, I think, but in general, you have this period of which you can go get an inspection, and you can negotiate anything based on that inspection if things were to come up. But that said, as this is the masterclass, I will say, in general, I would say internalize the idea that in this market, in a seller's market, negotiating for things found during inspection can be a challenge because sellers have a lot of power, right? But there is, once you're under contract, the sellers have emotionally come to terms with the idea that they've sold their house. So while it will hurt their ego a little bit and emotionally they might not be thrilled, you do have some negotiation room. You have some wiggle room. Unless there's another offer just waiting in the wing without an objection or something like that, then you lose you lose a little bit of power. But there, if safety items and code items were to come up that were not grandfathered in, then you do have a decent ground to negotiate, right? And while the seller has a lot of power in this market, emotionally, there's something to be said for, hey, do X, Y, Z, maybe contribute to closing costs, something like that, and you'll be through to the other side of this objection, and the likelihood of closing is very, very high at that point. So while it's difficult, I would say in general, I would focus on, there's going to be cosmetic stuff, there's going to be little condition stuff, but safety items, code items, if that's going to become a major headache for you down the road for those reasons, then that could be something you can negotiate on, but still the seller can tell you to kick rocks. So keep that in mind as well. So let's say that you're all the way through that, right? You're through the inspection, the objection deadline and the termination deadline. Cool. Then basically you're through to kind of another part of the escrow period where it's basically you're waiting on your financing and your appraisal, which again are kind of tied together. I see them as sort of similar. They're one and the same. They're connected, but basically the appraisal is when the lender hires that third-party appraiser to come out, determine what the value of the home is. Roughly, it's a little bit of an art, a little bit of a science, and basically try to justify the loan that you are asking for. So if that comes back good, cool, then you're kind of through to the financing contingency, which is basically just all the underwriting of your financial picture. Are you good to go? Which, if you're using our lender, if you're using the lender that we typically work with, then likely they did a very good job during the pre-approval, period, and you're in good shape. Unless something crazy happens, unless you do something that you absolutely should not do. Hey, real quick, alert, okay? If you're not watching, pay attention. If you're under contract on a home and you have a pre-approval, do not finance anything without asking the lender first. Don't buy furniture, right? Furniture. Oh, I wasn't thinking furniture. Yeah. Don't finance furniture. Don't, take a bunch of money out on your credit card for some reason. Certainly don't buy a car. Certainly don't co-sign on a car. I've had people do that because this was so frustrating. I had some people, a wonderful couple, and the gentleman co-signed on a car for his girlfriend because the people at the dealership said, "Oh, that won't affect your credit." It absolutely will. It's an item on your credit. And while fortunately for them, they still could close, he had to sell like $40,000 in stocks to pay off the car, which he would then take a loan out on again after closing and put the money back in stocks. Silly and just unfortunate. So in general, that was my alert, right? Don't buy anything. Certainly don't finance anything without asking the lender first. I'm under contract on a home right now. I'm currently in escrow. This is true. And I want to buy furniture, but I was like, well, how does this work? And he said, as long as I'm buying it in cash and not financing, there's no problem at all with what my picture is. That said, there might be some people where that's not a thing. So always ask before you make any kind of big purchase. And one rule that I actually like is once you're under contract on a home, then act like you just robbed a bank and you're playing it cool while the heat dies down, right? So just don't do anything out of the ordinary. Go to work, pay your bills, go to the grocery store, fill up with gas. That's it. Just play it cool. Be invisible financially as much as possible until you close. Then you can do your thing. You can make some moves, but generally be responsible. Now, let's say it appraises at value. You're all good and you're all underwritten. You're going to get something called a closing disclosure, which is from a lender, which legally they have to provide you. I think it's 72 hours or maybe 3 business days. Like that timeline, I think it's 3 business days prior to closing, right? And I think Saturday counts as a business day for whatever reason. So because the bank is open, I guess. So they're going to provide you the closing disclosure, which is going to sort of show you, here's how much cash you have to bring to close. Here is what your payment's going to be like. And here's kind of what all of the money that you're paying is going toward. And that's due 3 days before closing. Typically all good. If anything looks fishy, let us know, let them know, and they'll, address it. If maybe there is something fishy, or maybe they just have to explain it to you. But then you are 3 days out from closing, and in 3 days you close. So what's closing day? Basically, you're showing up to the closing table, which is just like an office table typically, and you're going to sign a bunch of papers, and it's probably going to take somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour, typically, ballpark, for a closing to occur. You're going to have a title company is typically where the closing is going to be. They're going to sit down with you, explain to you what you're signing, and then they're going to sort of connect those signed documents with the lender, and all of that will be recorded with the county. And basically, upon closing day, you will now officially be the owner of this home, which for probably 2/3 of people means that's the day that you move into that house. And there's another 1/3 of folks who, in writing the offer and being very compelling to the seller and really trying to accommodate the seller, you may have offered something called a post-occupancy closing or a rent back, which is basically you saying, we're going to close on this day, but you, the seller, get to stay in for X amount of days. Very common numbers are up to 30 days, up to 60 days. And the seller may not stay in absolutely that long, but you're basically giving them the right to do so. Maybe they have to close on another house. Maybe they even have to find another house. But that post-occupancy closing, that's a thing sometimes, but you will know this when writing the offer, once the offer is accepted, when you'll take possession. So some people, it's the day of closing, and some people, it's 1 month, it's 2 months after closing. I haven't seen a whole lot of post-occupancy possession longer than 60 days, but I suppose it could be a thing. So keep that in mind. And then let me dial back real quick. Let's say you're going to take possession on closing day. You're going to close, and then you're going to drive to the house likely and be very excited. And there's a chance that you're going to show up and think, well, this house isn't very clean. And that's fair, but legally in the purchase agreement, they are not required to hire a cleaner and do a deep clean or anything like that. A lot of people are used to rentals where as a tenant, it's up to you to patch all the holes, to clean the heck out of it, to clean the fridge. Otherwise, you're paying your landlord some money. It's not how it works when it comes to purchase. Legally, it's supposed to be swept clean unless you were to, some people also are writing into offers things like the seller doesn't have to clean the house, right? And that's because they know they're going to hire a cleaner anyway. And they want to incentivize the seller, like going to give them the easy option, which some sellers might say, well, that sounds sweet. All I have to do is get rid of my stuff and then I'm good. And some people might even say seller doesn't have to get rid of any personal property they don't want to part with, and they'll take care of that, which is, again, an option. I'm not saying that you want to do that, but it is a thing that some people are doing. So in general, though, you'll do closing, you'll go there, and it won't be spotless. So if you want it to be, I would generally recommend coordinating a cleaner of some sort for the day of closing, maybe the morning after closing or something like that. Just in general, depending on your level of cleanliness and depending on if you want to spend that money. Otherwise, bring a vacuum, bring a bunch of cleaning supplies, because you're likely going to want to clean it more than the seller does. But then good news is when you're a seller, when it comes time to sell this home, you don't have to do this deep clean in the middle of a move out and all that. So you will eventually reap the benefits of that more than likely. So then basically, whether it's closing day or 60 days out, you are the owner of the home. And depending on the situation, depending on if you have an HOA or whatever, you can paint the home fuchsia. It's your house. You can, within the law, you can do whatever you want. And congratulations, it is your house. And, we'll come over for the housewarming party if we're available. And I realize that this is a lot of information, and, hopefully you can go back and rewatch it if any part is confusing. Otherwise, get a hold of us and we will help you through the process. And as you're in the process, as you're, looking at homes and making offers, all of that starts to make a little bit more sense because it's sort of learning by doing rather than learning by listening. But nonetheless, I think if you have watched this far, first of all, thank you. Second of all, congratulations. Third, I really do think that you will be in a better position to navigate the process with us. And yeah, we appreciate y'all. As always, if you are thinking about buying a house or you're moving here, then get a hold of us. We'll crush it for you. Go to our website, welcometodenver.co, where we have a contact form, or shoot us an email directly to info@welcometodenver.co. And we look forward to it. We look forward to meeting you. And if you're new here, give the video a thumbs up. Say what's up in the comments. If you made it this far, what could we say? We could say something very specific. We could say Trenta Black Iced Tea, Extra Ice in the comments. That way I know you made it this far. That'll blow my mind because this is a long video. Trenta Black Iced Tea, Extra Ice. Cool. All right, y'all. See you in the next one. Appreciate you hanging out. Bye-bye.